So hello there guys, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the DNF1 F1 Podcast. I hope you guys are well. That is it for the first part of the F1 season. We are now officially in the summer break, although we've passed the halfway point. And what a crazy Hungarian Grand Prix that we got. We were hoping for some excitement. We were hoping for some crazy strategy calls, some crazy moves, and something to talk about going into the summer break. And we certainly got that. But I don't think many of us would have expected that from 10th place on the grid, Max Verstappen, the world champion, would have ended up winning the Hungarian Grand Prix after all the issues that he was having, and also by such a comfortable margin, although there were a few scary moments towards the end of the race owing to the weather, but that is only a very small headline. And before we get into this episode, I do want to plead with many of you guys that would have seen the race. Being a Ferrari fan, I'm kind of in my own sympathy corner at the moment, so please be gentle in the comments with the banter. I'm sure my guests will be somewhat gentle, but by all means, I'm going to be joining you on the rant tonight because I definitely feel that it's worth it. I can't defend this anymore. But anyway, look, I digress. For those of you that aren't aware of this, we are the independent F1 podcast made by fans and for the fans, as we bring you race reviews, previews, and all of the latest talking points, news, and gossip in the world of Formula One for your listening and viewing pleasure. So tonight we have a full DNF1 panel and a very special guest indeed. So first of all, introducing the DNF1 gang, we've got Lee Wallington and Courtney Pine. Lads, hope you guys are well. What did you make of the Grand Prix? Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, it was certainly entertaining. But once again, we've been let down by the same old suspects. I'm going to leave the floor to you on that one, Adam, to divulge in that later on. So I don't think you have to take too many guesses as to what I'm talking about.
No, absolutely not. And Lee, how are you doing, mate? You all good?
Yeah, I'm okay. I just really enjoyed that race. There was action up and down the field, and it was just an interesting all-round race. And it's really pleased to see that these new regulations have made it's what would have been a stereotypically hard overtaking circuit more overtaking. So this is success. This is good to hear. I love the Hungarian. It was a very enjoyable Hungarian.
And do you know what? I absolutely love the positive spin. I mean, if I'm going to take any way away from this race, I'm going to be happy about, that was certainly one of those. I must admit, I did enjoy a lot of the overtakes this weekend. But joining us on this episode, once again, a very much a stout guest on this show. We're absolutely privileged to have him on the show once again. It's Bryson Sullivan. Bryson, thank you so much for coming on the show once again. Quite a bit of a regular, so obviously we're very grateful for your time. But first of all, what did you make of this weekend's Grand Prix? You must have enjoyed it based on what went down.
No, the entire weekend was actually quite impressive. I think all of us expected Mercedes to be better off in France than they were. And it wasn't entirely a false dawn. Once we saw where their pace was, it was kind of expected how the weekend was going to go. But they had a really good weekend then. And then coming to the current race, it wasn't really sure how they would do. And suddenly, out of nowhere, from the top rope, on Saturday, George Russell comes in and actually strings together a lap that's good enough for pole position. And that changed the entire dynamic of the weekend. So it had some highs, it had some lows, but overall it was a pretty good weekend.
Yeah, I think we've got to put it down to some brilliant pieces of driving throughout certain parts of the grid this weekend. And of course, some that were just weren't even in the conversation at times. It's crazy how this race seems to have different dynamics to it at certain phases. But of course, we're going to get into that. And I think the first thing that we should talk about, above anything else, is what an incredible recovery from Max Verstappen and Red Bull. And as you mentioned, Bryson, this was a circuit that had certain attributes that I think we could agree didn't necessarily suit the Red Bull. Yet here we are. Not only did Max Verstappen recover a disappointing qualifying, albeit owing to some reliability troubles once in a while at Red Bull, something we haven't often associated with them since the start of the season. He didn't only win the Grand Prix, but he won it by quite a margin, and he did some donuts in the middle of the race while he was at it as well, whilst he was going through the overtaking business.
I think we're going to have a new saying. It's going to be called spin and win.
Oh, I like that.
That's going to be our, when you say you pulled over Verstappen, you're just going to say you did a spin and win. No, that was incredible. Given the characteristics of this track, we view it kind of as like a big kart track. It depends on high downforce, doesn't really reward high top speed in the same way that other circuits do. So we assume this would be a Ferrari stomping ground, and it kind of proved that way largely in qualifying, apart from George Russell's outlying lap. But what really happened was the tire degradation and then the specific performance on particular compounds totally changed the dynamic of this race, and it made it very interesting.
Absolutely. And I think if I could sum up how Max Verstappen won the Hungarian Grand Prix by a fairly comfortable margin, there's only one word to describe it, and that's strategy. And a brilliant strategy call, it must be said. You know, there was a phase of the race where Max was working his way through, and we thought perhaps he might challenge Russell and Sainz and Hamilton for a podium. It seemed for a while that Leclerc, towards the latter ends of the race, was going to be out on his own and just see it to the end. But then Red Bull once again pulling out a masterstroke of a strategy, which I can only congratulate them for doing that. Hannah Schmitz, the head of strategy operations at Red Bull, once again proving she is the queen, if not above all else, the GOAT of F1 strategies right now. Pulling it out of the bag for her driver once again, and Max made it almost look too easy in the end. It was, in your mind, Bryson, how did you see that strategy call go when it was being made at the time? Did you think it was going to be as powerful as it was, to a degree where we saw Max Verstappen have like a 7-8 second undercut on Charles Leclerc, let alone pass Russell and Sainz?
Yeah, actually, so one of the things that Red Bull's always been very good at is aggressive strategies. They don't necessarily always get them right in a sense, but being aggressive forces others to react, and it gives others the opportunity to unravel their own races, right? And so being aggressive, being one of the first teams to stop, definitely made that strategy possible. I think Mercedes and Red Bull had a better understanding of what the tire performance actually might be on some of the compounds. And if Ferrari had the same understanding that they had, they may have extended some of their stints in the first part of the race. Even though Max pitted early, they may have stayed out, quite a bit longer to give themselves options in the later part of the race. But yeah, as it was happening in real time, I could see that strategy was positive. If for nothing else, it would force the others to react. And that's what happened.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we'll talk about Ferrari a little bit later on, but sort of as a subplot to this, there was the opportunity, some might have said, for Ferrari to do something similar to what Sir Lewis Hamilton did, and that was extend that second stint, pit onto some softs and go to the end and be fast then. Given how close Sir Lewis was to Max, do you think it was possible for Ferrari to follow that and win, because their pace on the softs was a little bit underwhelming towards the end of the race as well?
It's not clear to me exactly why they couldn't do quite the same thing. There have been changes being made recently to the W13 that might offset things, but I feel like this is more a question of tire degradation more than like single lap performance or the initial part of the tire strategy. It just seemed like the Mercedes was able to keep those tires in a little bit better. That being said, there were other cars on track that had similar choices for rubber, and they had wildly different outcomes in the middle of the pack and further back. But overall, I think it just might be a car issue. For whatever reason, the Mercedes seemed to be a little bit better at keeping its tires in. And someone asked me, I think yesterday, did Mercedes really have the race pace to even keep up with the Ferraris? And they were basing their analysis on Friday practice. And I said, there's nothing about Friday practice that would indicate a Russell pole. Right? We can't use that data to extrapolate what we might think about the race pace. So let's just see how it unfolds. And it was pretty entertaining.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. And the track conditions from Friday to Sunday were completely night and day. They're completely different. If the track conditions were the same on Friday as they were on Sunday, there's probably a good chance that Ferrari probably would have comfortably won this race. As it were, they didn't, and in the end, they weren't even close. Lee, Courtney, I'm going to come to you guys on this one. Your thoughts on Max Verstappen's part in this incredible recovery this weekend? I mean, we've often associated some great drives of past champions in the manner that they've been quite aggressive, in the way that they've gone about their business, in the fact that, like a gladiator or a warrior. I mean, we talk about Sir Lewis in Brazil last season, how phenomenal that performance was. This wasn't quite in the same breadth in my mind in terms of how he went about it, but it was equally a brilliant performance. And some saying that it was Max Verstappen's best victory in some regards. Would you agree to that? Or how did you see it this weekend for him?
I mean, in a way, I'm not surprised that Max put in this kind of performance. We know how much of an exceptional driver Max is. Look, I've been overly critical of some of the conduct surrounding Max Verstappen, his team, and some of his fan base, but I've never taken away from the exceptional driver that Max is. We know he can put performances like this, and we've been saying this about this battle between Red Bull and Ferrari all season. Ferrari have to be on top of their game week in, week out to beat this this team in Max Verstappen and Red Bull, they are so on their day. They are so good. And yet again, we saw exactly what plays out when Ferrari make mistakes.
Yeah, absolutely. Lee, did you want to add anything to that?
I was going to say, it was all about damage limitation. And Max has proven, again, that, right, you maybe not consider it, but it was a championship drive. We've seen it in the past with Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso, Sebastian Vettel, damage limitation, and they somehow get on the podium or even win the race. Lewis has done it multiple times himself when he's had a bad qualifying. And so you could call that a championship drive. And it may not be, oh, wow, he's just done like a Sir Lewis in Brazil and come through the entire grid. But that was a solid performance from a solid strategy, and he delivered. Red Bull could have got the strategy right, and Max may not have delivered it on the performance on the track, and the strategy would have been wasted. So that's a very good drive from Max. Although I personally wouldn't call it his best victory, It was a very solid drive. Well, I'll call it a champion's drive.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. He just looks so calm and as Bryson put it brilliantly, he spin to win. And at that point, and of course it was a little bit scary at the end with the imminent rain coming, but it looked like it perhaps came a little bit too late for Sir Lewis, for example, to do anything about that. But that's how it goes sometimes. You just got to roll the dice when it comes your way, and he certainly did for Red Bull in a big way this afternoon. A quick word on Sergio Perez. Surprisingly, the last couple of races, he's been a little bit off the pace, and today, despite finishing ahead of Charles Leclerc, he was absolutely nowhere on pace compared to his teammate or even the Ferraris and Red Bulls or the Mercedes for the most part of it. There had been rumours going around the paddock that Sergio Perez was testing certain elements of this new revised floor that Red Bull are apparently going to be bringing when the new technical directive kicks in at the Belgian Grand Prix in next month's race. Bryson, I know, well, obviously, you've been on this podcast a few times now, and anyone in the F1 community that's heard of you will know that your technical and aerodynamic knowledge is already goated. So I'm going to put this question to you on this one. What's your thoughts on this? Is there any truth to this? And if that is the case, is this a concern for Red Bull, perhaps, that they may lose a bit of performance that may bring them back into the fight with Mercedes, for example?
So there's really two things I have to say about that. The first one is I don't have any inside information about actual, truth or falsity of that claim. And even if I did, I couldn't tell you. Right? Those first 2 points.
I was hoping you might lie for once, but a man of integrity.
But secondly, if I were Red Bull and I had this technical directive looming over me and I knew that it was going to come into effect after the break, it's not implausible to do research and to use the car as an experiment to sort of figure out what the impact of that would be. I'm not sure if the way it would manifest is actually the way that we're seeing Perez have issues with the car. When you say that he's slower, I think sometimes it's important to try to figure out why he's slower. If you were to go back to Paul Ricard, which is kind of like a front limited circuit, and you lose a lot of front grip is really what happens when you lose the tires. He was struggling there. And normally Perez is like a tire whisperer, right? He's like this great tire preservation artist, but that's mostly because of his throttle application. He's actually really good at not spinning up the rear wheels, which is amazing in a lot of situations, but it actually won't help you in a front limited circuit, right? And Hungary is kind of like that too. There's not a whole lot of very, very slow corners that you're sort of accelerating out of. There are a couple, but it's nothing like, Bahrain or Austria or something like that. So I think that there's the possibility that it's not implausible, let's say, if Red Bull wanted to experiment with that. Another possibility is that Red Bull is bringing developments to their car, make it faster, ostensibly for the sole purpose of making it faster and not for making it tailored to one driver or another. But in the natural course of development, you actually can change the balance of the car and make it harder for one person to drive. That's what's so impressive about people who win for years on end. They're actually driving different cars every time. They're learning how to adapt their style to be able to actually get the most of that particular package. So if it's possible that the development direction that Red Bull is going in is slightly away from Perez, that actually could also partially explain why he's having some difficulty of late. We'll see what happens when the break comes. I mean, my thoughts are, hypothetically, if they were testing a legal floor, quote unquote, they can actually make changes to their car for Spa and the races after that based on knowledge they already have now. And that actually might limit the damage, not being quite as far off the pace as we may have seen Perez, if that was the case.
Yeah, no, I think that's a lot of good points there. And I'm sure many people that listen to this will certainly appreciate that assessment. I think it's sort of too early to call yet. We'll have to wait and see what comes out following the summer break from Red Bull. But of course, I'm sure they'll be very much aware of the impact of what this new technical directive will have on their car in particular, and obviously how it affects them in performance, whether it's a lot or whether it's not so much. We'll have to wait and see. But obviously coming back to Red Bull, where they are right now, they're currently Max Verstappen 80 points ahead of Charles Leclerc in the Drivers' Championship right now. I mean, I obviously put the question to my panel last week on this one, and it seemed like it was all but one in some regards. It could be, if it wasn't already, it looks certainly that way now. Constructors' Championship, they're 97 points ahead of Ferrari, although Mercedes perhaps are more of an imminent threat at the moment than Ferrari. We'll have to wait and see. In your mind, Bryson, with a view to what comes out from the behind-the-scenes talks at the moment with the FIA and F1 owing to what technical regulation changes they may make owing to the porpoising issue for 2023, should Red Bull be too focused on next year's car at this point? Do they have an opportunity to explore that in more depth in the second half of the season, or do you feel they need to wait and see what the results are from when the FIA and F1 publish any sort of changes they may make for next season?
No, I mean, I think that Red Bull has had a sufficiently good start and is facing a set of rivals that are closer to fighting each other than actually fighting Red Bull. I think they could actually not so much take their foot off the gas, but if they wanted to spend some time focusing on 2023 to further push their advantage, they definitely could. I think that there are a number of ways to kind of look at this. As the season started, we kind of viewed this as this sort of titanic battle, Red Bull versus Ferrari and, Charles Leclerc versus Max Verstappen. And in a sense, it was. But I think in reality, what we may have seen was a Mercedes versus Ferrari fight embedded inside of a Red Bull fight. And one of those teams had a very good start and one had a very poor start. And they seem to sort of be converging in the middle. I mean, technical directives or not, Mercedes is coming. Mercedes is clearly building momentum in a way that is verifiable and sort of outside of random factors, okay? Whether there's going to be any new technical changes or not, I expect Mercedes to be an extremely strong force in the second half, and I expect them to win multiple races, actually. So does that impact Red Bull's championship? Probably not. They have enough of a lead, to really kind of not worry about that. But Mercedes could very possibly take second place in the constructors. They're only 34 points behind Ferrari now. I believe it's 30-something points behind now. And George Russell is ahead of Carlos Sainz in the Drivers' Championship. I mean, things are changing quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does get to a point where we can't just keep saying, well, this is reliability causing these issues. Like, it is down to Ferrari's being the architects of their own downfall, and Mercedes being impressively efficient and optimizing every opportunity that they've had. I mean, it's quite remarkable that in theory they're still in this fight despite having the third best car by quite some margin until very recently, where they've actually started to close the gap. And you can't ignore it now. Mercedes are certainly coming. And I think that segues us nicely to Mercedes, who, as we've already mentioned, another brilliant day. Perhaps a little disappointment that they didn't win, but I think many of us, even the most optimistic Mercedes fan, thought it would have taken a Herculean effort from George Russell to hold on to that incredible pole position that he got. Courtney, what were your thoughts on Mercedes today? And yeah, does this really bode well for the second half of the season? Are they coming?
Yeah, I mean, as you guys already said, we thought that, Mercedes always perform well in Silverstone and France. And we thought, maybe just because of the track specifics, it was just down to, the strengths of the Mercedes. But we're seeing, at Hungary, completely different track compared to France. More street circuit which Mercedes this season have really struggled at. So it does bode well for the rest of the season. I think we're going to the second half of the season. I think Singapore will be a really interesting one. If Mercedes are sort of thereabouts in Singapore, that really does bode well for where the car goes, not only for the rest of the season, but into 2023 and onwards. But again, I think the way that Mercedes are chipping away, it just shows the serial champions that they are. They have definitely been handicapped the way that we've seen in the past with Ferrari and McLaren when they've dominated. But unlike the likes of Ferrari and McLaren, Mercedes are fighting back a lot faster. And I think it just shows how good they are as a team. And I do feel that Red Bull, at this stage, are probably more worried in the future about Mercedes than they are Ferrari. Not only because of the raw pace that Mercedes can find, but because they operate so much better as a team. And for me, I think they have the best driver pairing on the grid. So if you go in a position towards the end of this season and next season where Mercedes are, able to compete with Red Bull, not only do Red Bull have to worry about Lewis Hamilton, but if Lewis Hamilton has an off day, Mercedes can rely on George Russell to be there as well. So I reckon the future is exciting for Mercedes, and I think particularly for George Russell, because we know that first win is inevitable.
Yeah, absolutely right. And obviously, Bryson, I feel like you're burning really to add to this, so I'm going to throw the floor over to you on this one.
This is just a minor point to add to what Courtney said. Not only is it the case that Mercedes has an incredible track record of being a very efficient operation, but let's not forget that the cost cap sliding scale was reset on July 1st, right? So, previously, the reason why Mercedes is on the back foot and Ferrari is so resurgent is because Ferrari had 10% more wind tunnel and CFD time than Mercedes had previously, and Red Bull had 5%. As of July 1st, since Mercedes is third in the championship, now Mercedes has 10% more wind tunnel time than Red Bull does and 5% more than Ferrari. So not only is Mercedes coming in the sense of their learning their own car and figuring out how to actually get it to stop porpoising and bottoming and things, but they have more money to develop it anyway. So there's any number of factors why you should expect to see Mercedes being a serious force in the future.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more with that one. I think that's a really, really good point. And obviously a focus on the drivers for this weekend. Obviously George Russell getting that incredible pole position lap. A lot of people were citing that down to a few things. Russell obviously loves the Hungarian Grand Prix circuit. In the past, he's historically gone well there in qualifying. I think he has the unofficial lap record, unless I'm mistaken on that one. It might have been some time ago. I think Sir Lewis might have done better than that in the W11, but I'm sure someone will correct me in the chat if they know or in the comment section. But on their performance today, I think George Russell, despite losing out to his teammate in the end, I think he can be pretty happy with P3. It was a great performance today, and ultimately, you could argue that the only reason why he didn't win the race today is he wasn't driving a Ferrari or Red Bull. Lee, what would your thoughts be on that one?
Well, I don't think you can include the Ferrari in the sense
the car,
winning the race.
The car, not so much the strategy. I mean, if we take strategy, we give Mercedes strategists and they manage the Ferrari car, then I think we can sort of add that caveat in. But that's a fair point. Let's say Red Bull for argument's sake then.
Okay. No, I think he can be very pleased with the weekend. Obviously, surprised everyone yesterday, getting his first pole. And for me, I said in the preview that the race will be won on the pit stops. And effectively was. Max and Red Bull won the race on their pit stop starting it early. But George came out ahead of the Ferraris after his first pit stop. And so that was key for Mercedes. And to keep the Ferraris behind for 30 laps, most people wouldn't have thought George could have kept the Ferraris behind for 30 laps. So that in itself was impressive that on merit, he was ahead of the Ferraris for 30 laps. That is a key point to take away from that. And so he can be very pleased with how it went. Obviously, he wanted to win, but he can be very pleased with what he managed to deliver this weekend. And Lewis, for himself, how he hunted down the Ferraris. And then George, he can be very pleased again when he was starting out position, considering his DRS failure yesterday. So, I mean, Mercedes could be just completely chuffed with their result. On merit, they were on the podium without any DNFs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you look at the strategy, you could argue that George was driving the second best option in terms of strategy. It was only Sir Lewis that actually made the medium soft strategy work. For some reason, Ferrari just didn't work out eventually when they did it. But for George, you could argue he was in the less optimized strategy, and he did a great job. And it was only Max that was on the same strategy as him that beat him. And again, we're talking, we're not suggesting that Russell is as good as Max Verstappen in the same way that we're not suggesting he's as good as Sir Lewis, but he's at a very high level at the moment, and he's proving with these performances that he's certainly raising his game and certainly one to watch out for. He's doing a solid job, and I think he'd be delighted with that at the end of the day. We should also talk about some of the battles that was going on. Obviously, he had a great battle with Charles Leclerc. Obviously, ultimately lost out, but it was some really exciting stuff. I mean, what did you make of that battle, Bryson? Were you impressed with the level of car control that not just Charles Leclerc, but George Russell also had as well?
George Russell actually has really good wheel-to-wheel craft. I remember seeing it when he was fighting with Fernando Alonso at Austria last year, when he was fighting for that first point and couldn't quite get it. If you recall, he actually got his first points for Williams at Hungary last year. So that this track actually is special for him. He got his first points there. He got his first pole position. Maybe next year he'll get his first win. But his wheel-to-wheel has been excellent. He also showed that in Spain, fighting with Max Verstappen for a few laps and keeping him behind. And he was fair. He was fair with Charles Leclerc. And sort of surprisingly, he was also engaged in a fight with Lewis Hamilton near the end there. I assumed that Mercedes would recognize that they were on different strategies and sort of move him out of the way, but that's not the case. That was a legitimate on-track overtake, and I think Lewis was fair with him, and vice versa. I think there's people kind of underestimate what George is about because he's been in a backmarker team for so long. But there's a reason why he was selected by Mercedes. He is the leader in training of Mercedes. He's not a number 2 driver. He's a number 1 driver in training. It's kind of like the movie Men in Black, with Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones. George is Will Smith in this scenario, okay? And Lewis Hamilton is Tommy Lee Jones. And he's training his replacement. He has the best possible teacher.
I absolutely love that comparison. I might have to watch Men in Black now later tonight. You've inspired me, Bryson. I like it. But you're absolutely right. And I think this is a fair assessment of George's performance this season. I know I've seen a lot of people on social media try to make comparisons or drive a wedge between the two, but of course there are so many different caveats of what's been going on with Mercedes. It's been a collective effort and it's bearing fruit, and we may see the rewards of that very, very soon. Courtney, did you want to add anything on George's performance?
Yeah, I mean, with George Russell in general, I've been watching George since his GP3 days, and just the way that he performed so consistently, even in the junior categories, and the way that he performed at probably the slowest car at Williams, and then how well he settled into Mercedes. Let's not forget when he had the feeling for Lewis when he had COVID, and he would have easily won his first race if it wasn't for external issues. I think George Russell, if you're looking from a British perspective, I think George Russell will be the next British world champion. I think if you give George the car, he'll definitely go on to win a world championship. Question is, will he do it whilst Lewis is in the team? I still think Lewis will have the edge. I still think Lewis is, he set the records for a reason. I don't like how people diminish Lewis's achievements basically on the car. He beat Fernando Alonso, or he drew with Fernando Alonso in his first ever season at McLaren. I still don't understand why people diminish what Lewis has achieved. So I still think it'd be difficult for George to beat Lewis over the course of a season if they're in a battle for a championship. But I have no doubts whatsoever that George Russell will be a championship winner or a multiple world champion by the end of his career.
Well, I can certainly think of a few reasons why people tend to diminish Sir Lewis's achievements, but I like to think that we've created a safe space on this podcast where we just drown that out and ignore it, because that's not really the people we should be listening to. And I'm sure many of you listening will probably agree with that, and if you don't, well, that's absolutely fine. But anyway, I digress on that one. Talking of Sir Lewis Hamilton, again, another brilliant performance from Sir Lewis. Obviously not a victory yet, but it seems like it could only be a matter of time. The opportunity, he's putting himself in those positions where only needs something to happen, just one more place ahead of him. Unfortunately for Sir Lewis, it's Max Verstappen, and that doesn't happen very, very often, especially not twice in the same race at least. But he's got his 5th podium in a row. Another P2 showing some great race pace, had what was seemed the optimum strategy, and if it wasn't, he certainly made it work for himself. And I think my personal favourite was that he's kept up his 100% record of finishing on the podium with an LGBTQ plus helmet on, which is always a quite nice thing. I think my favourite...
it must be causal at this point. There's no other option. Yeah.
Oh, that's it.
It's got to be causal.
That's it. What I'm hoping it does, Bryce, and it might inspire everybody else to adopt similar helmet designs just to see if it brings them good fortune. And, all in raising awareness, why not? If there's some meritocracy in that, go for it. I think my favourite response on this one, and this isn't mine, so I'm quoting this one, someone put, "You mean the GPTQ helmet because Ferrari took the L."
Oh,
I mean,
yeah,
it's the accuracy is there, but the savagery is a little bit.
It's a little bit, yeah.
It's too soon. Like next week, I'll be happy to laugh freely at that. But no, I mean, let's be honest. Lewis could have won that race. He actually probably could have won in Silverstone were it not sort of getting mixed up in Perez and Sainz and the rest of them. But he definitely could have had the pace to win in Hungary. And I think the thing about that is that DRS failure came at just the worst time. As soon as he went down the main straight, I went back and listened to his onboards. He knew immediately that he didn't have DRS and had to sort of abandon that lap. But this is how you can tell Lewis is not normal. He was driving the same car as George Russell had. Maybe there may have been slight setup differences, but he was able to have much better tire preservation and much better average pace. I believe that if Lewis Hamilton was able to actually finish his, or actually do a proper qualifying lap, he would have probably been in the front row. And in that situation, you can force others to change their strategy because they're in their pit window. And I think he had the pace to win. Genuinely. So I'm very curious to see how the second half unfolds. Lewis has always been amazing at Hungary. He's got more wins there than anybody. There are other circuits coming up where he might be pretty good as well, but he's not going to be a specialist there in the same way that he is at Hungary. So we'll see what happens in the future.
Well, there certainly aren't many places where Sir Lewis Hamilton isn't considered a specialist around, but I absolutely agree. I think the pace for once this season was certainly there for him to try and get the result, but obviously there were certain caveats and factors at play that held him back a little bit. But that aside, as you said, superhuman effort, something that we've expected from Sir Lewis throughout his entire career, and this season we're starting to see he's really in the mood again. He's really finding that groove, and it's a scary thing when Sir Lewis is happy, he's enjoying himself. I mean, the smile, I've never seen a wider smile on his face for some time. He's really excited by what's happening at Mercedes, and I think it certainly bodes well. If it doesn't bear fruit in the second half, it's certainly going to be something to watch out for in 2023, and I'm sure he'll stick around for maybe a little bit longer, as we sort of alluded to in our last show. Not that we know anything, but I just got a good feeling. Courtney, Lee, what are your thoughts on Sir Lewis's performance today? Do you agree with Bryson? Did he have the pace to win today?
Oh, absolutely. If he'd started higher up the grid, I have no doubt he'd have been thereabouts. I feel that Lewis was probably, barring Max Verstappen, perhaps Lewis is probably the most comfortable driver out there today. It was with hindsight, maybe he pitted a little bit too late on the first stop. But other than that, a flawless performance from Lewis, and yeah, exactly. It bodes well for the second half of the season, and I think Lewis has always had that hunger. Look, that's what's made him the champion that he is. But yeah, I do feel that win is inevitable. But it'll be interesting. I say when it comes to Mercedes, the race that I'm really intrigued by is Singapore. If they perform well at Singapore, then the future is definitely bright for them.
Yeah, it looks promising. Lee, what are your thoughts?
As I said earlier, he could be pleased with his race as well. He's a specialist, as Bryson already mentioned, at Hungary. But I'm going off the tangent, but Lewis knows that in the second half of the season, he always performs better than the first half of the season. Even when he's not in a championship fight, for just whatever reason, the tracks, or maybe he takes 10 races to get himself in the sweet spot to just nail his setup and his performance and get to understand. I don't know how he works, but he's always stronger in the second half of the season.
Yeah.
So he can go into the summer break going 2 seconds. This is good. I just need to go up one more place, and I know it's going to come in the second half because I'm just that good in the second half. The team, he has faith in the team to deliver the upgrades and set up that he needs to get that performance. So he can be so ecstatic with where he is currently. Obviously, he would obviously prefer to be leading the championship, obviously, like any other driver. But from where they started the season, he can be so pleased with where he's got to at this point of the season.
Yeah, no, I think so too. Bryson, of course, we'll get your final thoughts before we move on this one.
Yeah, just a short thing. I said at the beginning of the season that Mercedes was in a very difficult position because they didn't understand something. They didn't understand the car that they built. And if they wanted to actually win and be competitive, they would have to learn something. I've seen enough in the last 10, 11 races, I guess 12 races now, that they have actually learned something about their car. They've learned something about how to set it up, how to avoid the porpoising issue and the bottoming issue. They're smarter today than they were a few races ago. And that makes them quite dangerous. So, yes, I think Mercedes is definitely going to be in a good position. But again, this is the F1, all right? Standing still is moving backwards. Ferrari's going to have something. Red Bull will have something. We don't know what's going to happen for sure, but it's going to be much more of a three-way fight going forward.
Yeah, I mean, it surprises me because a lot of people, myself included, were asking the question a few months back, should Mercedes write off this concept and work on something going forward? Have they missed a trick? Have they gone the wrong way with these new regs? And from what we've seen, at least right now, we can certainly say that there is plenty more potential in this concept than I think a lot of us amateurs, for lack of a better way of putting it, could give them credit for. And it's remarkable to see how they've managed to turn this around in such a short time. They're certainly not all the way there yet, but they're certainly in a position now where with drivers like Sir Lewis and George Russell, they're constantly putting themselves in the equation where if things go their way, they'll be the ones on the top step of the podium. And it seems right now the only reason why they're not is because Max Verstappen is winning in ahead of them. It's the only reason, because everything else is going in their way in that regard.
You know, I'd just like to chip in with one last thing, and this probably lead us up nicely to Ferrari. Another reason why we need Mercedes back in it is because Mercedes are the only ones clearly that can challenge Max. We can't rely on Ferrari. Simple as that. So please, 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 Mercedes, give us something to look forward to in the second half of the season.
Yeah, I wish I could argue that. I really, really do, but I can't. I've got nothing to back myself up on that one. But look, let's move on to Ferrari and open up Ferrari's sympathy corner, where I'm sure the population is growing by the weekend. I think the summer break has probably come at a perfect time for Ferrari to kind of assess what's going on. Perhaps both championships are certainly out of the window if they weren't already for them for 2022. But if it's not reliability issues, or if it's not for the rare mistake, I think we should stress, from their drivers, they don't make too many of them, it must be said. The one constant that has remained with Ferrari that have held them back is the strategy mistakes. And the most amazing thing, they seem to come up with new ways to wreck their own races. I mean, 20 or so, 30 laps before the end, we look like we're in a position where we're potentially discussing the possibility of Ferrari getting a 1-2. Obviously, the strategy call from Red Bull for Max changed the game a little bit. But when Ferrari had the balls in their court, they just once again just come agonizingly so far away and messing up completely. Bryson, in your mind, how should we be surprised now that Ferrari just keep making these mistakes when it comes there, when it goes to them to make that decision?
First of all, let's be clear. There's a reason why we hold Ferrari to such a high standard. Right? We hold them to such a high standard because of their own performance and because they hold themselves to a high standard, as they should. And it's because of their past success and because of what the community at large knows what they're capable of that makes some of these more recent missteps more difficult to sort of understand and accept. I think today Ferrari probably had a very good strategy on paper planned prior to the race starting. The issue is, and the wild card was just how atrociously bad the hard compound was for Leclerc. It was so bad that they couldn't even run it to the end of the race because they would lose more positions running that tire to the end of the race than pitting, taking the penalty for a full pit stop, and then switching to a different tire. That is a completely different level of bad that they just had they were totally blindsided by, and they arguably shouldn't have been blindsided by it because of the experience of the Alpines, and I think Daniel Ricciardo as well. Someone in the team should have been looking at those other teams' performances on that tire and communicating that information back to tactics or strategy or whoever it is. I think the biggest difficulty is just that it's a real-time decision. You already have a game plan of what you're going to do in every given situation, but now you're getting new information as the race is going on. And it's just that conversion of that information into actually affecting the strategy may have kind of been where they fell short. If they had kind of seen what others were doing, they may have been able to sort of extend a little bit longer some of the sense that they were on, maybe make it possible to go to a soft at that end instead of a hard, but they found out too late, and it was a difficult day for them.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of want to expand on that point that you make, because it's a really good one, that we hold Ferrari to such high standards, especially when they have a car that, in theory, has been the best car all round over the first part of the season. I think if you look at the performances of everybody, Ferrari have had the best car at more races than not in this first part. Should we be taking considerations for Ferrari? As Mattia Binotto pointed out, they obviously aim to be fighting for a championship. They don't exactly expect to win it. Should we be holding this team to the same regard as previous championship winning teams in the past, or should we be giving them more consideration force scenarios like this where they do come up short more often than not when they're put in a position where they have to react?
Everything about the company and the team is about winning. The entire purpose of existence for the factory and the personnel and the engineers is to build a car that can win. They've kind of done that, right? They've actually built a car that can win. You have to have the other components of the team ready to go at the same high level to be able to actually execute on that when you have the car. Because I can tell you, you're not always going to have a car that's capable of winning. As we said, there were some very specific and easily identifiable factors that put other rivals on the back foot, i.e. Mercedes. They're not going to be on the back foot indefinitely. So you're right. So not only is it the case that Ferrari is having difficulties right now, but they're going to face an even stronger set of rivals going forward. So they're going to have to raise their game anyway. So it's just a compounding problem that they really need to get their a handle on.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. I mean, we saw Mattia Binotto sort of going up and down the pit wall. Obviously, he was meant to be talking to Sky F1 on the broadcast, and I don't remember hearing much from Mattia in the second half of the race. I don't think he wanted to talk to Crofty or anybody. There was a bit where it was just radio silence almost, so I could totally understand that. But it just shows how difficult things are at Ferrari at the moment, that they were in a position a few races in this championship where people, myself included, felt that this could be Ferrari's championship to lose. And as it stands, the question remains, should Ferrari keep fighting this year, or should they just accept whether they come second or third and focus on 2023? Courtney, we do have to talk about Leclerc and Sainz, obviously their races, how they unfolded. Obviously, please do feel free to add your thoughts on what we've just been talking about with Ferrari. But once again, Charles Leclerc finishing this race well behind the race win, a race that he probably should have won outright himself. It looked like he had it in the bag 2/3 in once he got past George Russell. I mean, how much more disappointment can the guy take this season owing to what's been going on recently?
I think to sum up the situation at Ferrari, we're seeing Carlos Sainz, being the team player that he is, sort of played down the ineptitude that we saw at Ferrari today and sort of saying, oh, we didn't quite have the outright pace. And then afterwards, we saw Charles Leclerc getting interviewed, and he rightly said, I did have the pace. Charles Leclerc in particular had the pace to win that race. And it was once again a bizarre decision from Ferrari that cost them the race. And for me, it genuinely makes me scratch my mind that as an individual, that a farmer from East London could see that Ferrari were making a mistake. Yet the people that are probably should be the most smartest people on the planet, they're employed to make these decisions, couldn't see it. For me, it's mind-boggling. Ferrari have the car. That I think overall they've had the fastest car for the majority of the season. I do think some of the performances from Max has sort of covered up the performance deficit that Red Bull have had to Ferrari. But it's a decision making, and touching on from what Bryson said, this is a real opportunity that Ferrari are wasting, because the rivals are only going to come back stronger and stronger. And Ferrari had to win this championship and give themselves sort of the marks to go into future seasons and build something stronger. But right now, I'm looking into the future, and I can only see the rivals getting a better Ferrari more and more. And I was thinking about this before we start recording. In a couple of years' time, when Lewis Hamilton retires, if I was Charles Leclerc, I'd be looking to get that Mercedes seat, because if Charles Leclerc wants to be a world champion, he's got to be looking at that Mercedes seat. Or if Max Verstappen goes to Mercedes, he'll be looking at the Red Bull seat. Because, look, it could change. But right now, if Charles Leclerc wants to be a world champion, I don't see it happening at Ferrari. They've given us no reason to believe they're ready to be world champions.
Yeah, I mean, Bryson, you sort of alluded on this a little bit earlier with Ferrari's strategy, because a lot of people were saying that Ferrari messed up on their strategy by putting Charles Leclerc on the harder tyres rather than let him run longer like Sir Lewis did on the mediums, extend that stint, because he was on younger mediums as well. He was on younger mediums than Russell and Verstappen was. He did pit, I think it was only Sir Lewis that pitted after Charles, or maybe, the other way around, I can't quite remember, but they were one of the latter ones. Could he have done that and gone on the softs to win in the way that Sir Lewis had gone that way? Or was the strategy doomed from the start because Russell on the softer tyres? That might have been the better way to go off the start. And when, of course, it gave them options onto the mediums, because Ferrari went medium. They couldn't go medium again. they had to go soft or hard, and perhaps they felt that they may have doomed themselves from the very beginning.
Yeah, I feel like, so there's two things. One is how quickly you wear through the grip of a tire depends on your fuel load. So the more fuel load you have, the quickly you run out of grip. So that's something to consider, and you're balancing that with how much grip you get off the line and how you pass people on the start. I mean, I know that they were considering these things in their decision making, but it's also true that the tires that you have are kind of unknowns. Maybe it would have been better to go, medium hard and then see sort of how that goes to give you some sort of option, down the line. Either keep the hard if it's good or get rid of it immediately, right? If it's bad. Going medium right away sort of sealed their fate. Whatever their fate was, whatever the fate that was tied to the hard tire, it was sealed when they went medium and had the stint lengths that they originally had. If they had hypothetically gone a bit longer, it probably could have worked. It seems like the low temperatures were part of the problem today. Mm-hmm. It seems like the low temperatures were part of the problem in getting the tires sort of fired up. And it seems like it wasn't the problem of the hard tire, just like not having enough grip overall. It just was so difficult to the compound to switch on. They just never switched on. And that's part of the reason why the grip was so bad.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point, because I think Mattia Binotto, before the start of the race, was a bit concerned about the potential graining on the medium tyres, particularly the front left, at this particular circuit. Because of the colder weather, it would make it a bit more difficult for them to generate that heat and that load. And it was something that ultimately caused them problems on the softer tyres. And a quick word on Sainz, Lee. Obviously, big Carlos Sainz fan on this show. And it's a strange one today for him, because whilst he was not necessarily affected by the strategy blunders that Ferrari made to the other side of the garage, he kind of went more the strategy that perhaps Ferrari should have gone with Leclerc. He wasn't exactly very impressive on those softer tyres towards the end anyway. And furthermore, he'll probably be quite disappointed by the fact that not only was he beat by George Russell on what seemed to be the inferior strategy, he was also beat by Sir Lewis Hamilton in a car that was meant to be considerably weaker than the one Sainz had, but he had the same strategy as Sainz and made it work. So what could you make of Sainz this day? Certainly a bit of a head scratcher.
It is a bit of a head scratcher. I just want to throw a thought before I get onto your question. Is obviously we don't know what happened on the strategy discussion, but I do wonder, did Carlos have another discussion with the Ferrari pit wall about putting them on hard, and did Carlos make a effective decision going, I don't want the hard? Because we know he's done similar leadership decisions in the past at other races. We don't know if that happened. It's just a theoretical thought. I wonder if that occurred, that Carlos took the initiative.
Well, just to sort of
the tires.
Yeah, just to sort of throw in on there, that decision they made with Leclerc, the first thing I thought of, other than a few expletives I'm not going to repeat on this show because I like to keep it PG, was thinking back to Abu Dhabi 2010 when Red Bull pitted Mark Webber to try and undercut Massa in the Ferrari, and Ferrari reacted by pitting Alonso, and he got stuck behind Petrov, which ultimately cost him a chance to win the World Championship in a race that he should never have been pitting him in the first place. And it felt a little bit like that Ferrari just thought, they panicked and just pit Leclerc, who, all right, the undercut was massive, Max got, but obviously they were reacting with the wrong car, really. They should have just seen how it played out with Sainz.
Yeah, no, you're right on that. I'm just wondering, it was just a thought question of, I wonder if Carlos took the initiative again. But on Carlos' actual performance, I think he would have been slightly disappointed that he didn't show the speed that he showed through practice and through qualifying, because he seemed to be the fastest Ferrari driver the weekend up until the race. And when Charles was like, yeah, I'm here. I didn't turn up the last couple of days, but I'm here now, which is obviously the day it counts. So I think he'd be disappointed that he wasn't able to extract that performance. But as Bryson alluded to, with the hard tyre, maybe there was something with the car that was just the balance of the temperature. They just couldn't switch on the soft tyres either. The medium was their sweet tyre, but you can't do a whole race distance on the medium tyre, or unless you want a penalty. So maybe there's nothing Carlos could have done. They were ruined with the hard tyre. They were ruined with the soft tyre. I mean, that's it. If they started on the soft, the race could have been really bad at the beginning, and the race could have come to them later on. We don't know how it could have gone. It's just just doesn't seem to be much either driver could have done to get themselves out of today's situation. Yeah,
I mean, before we sort of summarise some of the races in the midfield in the second part of this, I do feel like I should ask Bryson on this one, because with Ferrari's logic to switching Leclerc to the harder tyres at that point in the race to try and cover off Verstappen, obviously we saw on Alpine how they were struggling on the harder tyres. Obviously Ricciardo later on struggled on the hards, as did a few in the midfield when they eventually went onto them. Do you think Ferrari probably were aware of that data? I'm sure they would have been, but decided to go on the hards anyway for Leclerc because they felt that, well, their car is probably as good as anybody's, if not better than anybody's, at switching these tyres on. Compared to some of the others. We saw at the start of the race that people were saying that Ferrari could start on the mediums because they could switch them on under the cold weather, then compared to Russell in the Mercedes who had to start on softs. Do you feel that that was part of Ferrari's thought process, thinking that, well, if anybody can switch these hard tyres on and make them work, it's going to be us?
It wouldn't really surprise me if that was their thought strategy, but it seems like there's a disconnect between what their perception of the tire behavior is and what it actually is. A perfect example of this is going back to France, right? What happened with that pit stop with Carlos Sainz, and he was famously battling with Perez? They wanted to pit him off of his tires because they were concerned that he was going to sort of hit the cliff and he wouldn't, he'd be vulnerable later on and maybe, finish fifth in the worst case scenario. By pitting him, they guaranteed that he finished fifth, right? And the issue is, you can ask, well, would he actually have had a problem with those medium tires going to the end? There was one other person that had that same tire strategy as Carlos Sainz did in France, and it was Pierre Gasly, right? Pierre Gasly pitted on the exact same lap because of Leclerc's crash, and went on to this medium tire, and that lasted, for whatever reason, inexplicable reasons, it lasted really well to the entire end of the race. And Twitter is a weird place. I was able to actually ask Pierre Gasly about this the other day, and he was actually having a great time. He said that the tires felt great at the end of the race. So it proves that real-time data could have been available to help Ferrari make a decision, but they had their own perception about how things were going to go and made the decision based on that. As long as they can improve what their model of reality is, it shouldn't be a problem. There just seems to be a disconnect there right now, which is complicating things.
Yeah. Now, on a separate note, that was on their podcast space, wasn't it, on Twitter? Yeah, I was listening into that. No, you did a good job. Kudos on that one. It was a really, really good question, and it must have been, quite fun to talk to Pierre Gasly on that show.
I've done it twice already. It's too much. I got to stop doing it.
See, we've already got ourselves an F1 Twitter celebrity here in Bryson, and he's got the technical prowess to back that up as well, unlike some others must say. But look, that's neither here nor there. But we should talk about some of the other stories. Of course, even though we didn't really get to see much of it, because most of the broadcasting seems to be focused on the front. We very rarely see stuff going on in the midfield. But McLaren, a bit of a contrasting day for them, because they looked like they had Alpine beat all ends up. I mean, Norris was in his own sort of race. Ricciardo had overtaken the Alpines, which probably was the move of the race when they were fighting amongst each other. And then obviously the strategy call to put him on the hard tyres completely wrecked his race and sent him down to 15th. So how are we rating McLaren's day, guys? Because ultimately they come away with the same number of points as Alpine, when probably could have been a good opportunity to get a few more today.
I think if you have a look at Lando Norris, once again, he's proven to be the best of the rest. Now, originally we were calling Mercedes the best of the rest, but now it seems like Mercedes are in that front three battle again. Lando Norris is really making himself the best of the rest. And once again, it just raises the question, when is this guy going to be given a car capable of winning races? Because he has the talent to do it. And right now, it might sound a bit lazy what I'm about to say, but it just seems right now Lando Norris is carrying that team. He seems to be the guy that always gets the results. And we are seeing slight improvements from Daniel. But it just seems in this battle with Alpine, I feel that McLaren probably have the slight advantage in terms of pace. But both of their drivers just don't seem to be on it. I don't quite know what's happening with Daniel still.
No, I mean, he did drive relatively well today, but as I said, the strategy kind of just went against him towards the latter half. Bryson, what did you make of McLaren today?
Yeah, I think Lando is actually a very, very good qualifier, actually. I think his race pace is strong as well, but I think some of his qualifying laps have been really outstanding. And those have been some of the things that have sort of put him in the conversation for some of the best of the new up-and-coming drivers. Regarding Ricciardo, yes, I mean, he certainly had difficulty with the hard tire. Let's not forget, he crashed into Lance Stroll in turn
2, yes.
2.
And yeah.
And he got a 5-second penalty for that. And so that's part of the problem as well as to where he finished. I mean, I think McLaren is definitely going in the right direction. They recently shifted from a sort of an in-washing sort of side pod bodywork to a more down-washing one, more akin to Red Bull, and Aston Martin and Williams are also pursuing that option. It seems to be much more consistent in terms of the downforce that it creates, and it seems to be a little bit less like ride height sensitive. It seems to be better in terms of ultimate performance, but also consistency. So that's a major step for them. It's one of the reasons why they were being so careful in pre-practice to not drive over the curbs, because they didn't have an overabundance of spare floors, and the new floor they brought to Hungary was working really well. So I think they're definitely trending in the right direction, technically speaking. We'll see how they go with the strategy going forward.
And Lee, final thoughts on McLaren? Is there a missed opportunity to pick up some points on Alpine today?
It was a missed opportunity, especially where once Alpine put on their hard tyres. I think the Alpines put on the hard tyres before Daniel did, I believe.
They were trying to make the one-stop work today, weren't they? Yeah.
But so it was a missed opportunity. If McLaren's strategy was slightly different, they could, they noticed the hard tyres aren't working, the Alpines, they could have put Daniel on a different strategy. So it is a missed opportunity in that sense. And until the hard tyre and obviously the crash with Stroll, Daniel was actually doing quite well this week, and then the actual gap to Lando. So you could say he's improved in that sense. I mean, it was a half a second in qualifying, which is still a large gap, but it's a lot smaller than some of the other gaps he's had to Lando in qualifying. And he was there or thereabouts at the beginning of the race with Lando. So it's an improvement from him. And I think in this instance, apart from his mistake, the team also let him down. So you can't all put it on Daniel not delivering this weekend. But yeah, once again, Lando, brilliant job. You could always argue that Lando just doesn't get enough recognition at the moment because he just drives so brilliantly. And it's such a wonderful to see him drive, just how he handles that car.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. And Bryson, I might ask you quickly about this, because when it comes to Daniel Ricciardo, it's so really hard to judge where he kind of stacks up in terms of how well he's driving compared to how we're used to see him at better times in his past. And I think one thing that we can all agree on is that what's really been an issue at McLaren is that we've seen certain peaks with Daniel at McLaren. Obviously he won at Monza last season. He put in a few good performances here or there. We've not really seen a cluster of performances where Ricciardo's been consistently close, at least, to Lando Norris. And I suppose it kind of asks two questions on this one. Firstly, obviously, why you might think that is, and is Daniel getting closer to Norris? And secondly, is Daniel driving to his level and Lando is just performing brilliantly, or is Lando, doing what he's expected of him and Daniel's not performing well enough?
Yeah, Daniel's not an old man by any standard. He's still a young guy. He still would be expected to be performing at a high level in terms of the profile of a Formula One driver. I think the average person underestimates how sensitive drivers' driving styles are to particular type of cars, right? And I think we overestimate how easy it is for a quote unquote good driver to drive any sort of machine. You're good, right? You're a good driver. Surely you can drive any machine to 10/10 of its pace. I think that's harder than a lot of people realize. And it's not even necessarily that the team is developing the car specifically for one driver. It's just that the concept that they've converged on, the way it needs to be driven, may not be what the driver is sort of expecting to see. And again, this is what makes driving so beautiful. To be fast, you don't just have to know like what your car is capable of in a corner. You have to be able to sort of look at the corner, look at how much grip there is, where the racing line is, and decide how much speed you can take into the corner. You have to know what the answer is before you get there. And a big part of that is knowing what car you have underneath you. And if the driver can't really sense that because of the car is too on the front end or it's too understeering, or they can't get the setup right, you could just be kind of below where your potential is. So Daniel actually may have better performances in another team, not because McLaren is disadvantaging him in any specific way that I know of, but just because the car behavior is different. It happens, and it wouldn't surprise me if it happened.
Yeah, very, very true. And some really good words there, of course. Guys, of course, let us know your thoughts in the comments section for all of the topics that we discuss if you're watching this on YouTube. Now, quick word on Alpine. Strategy, obviously, it wasn't the right call for them in this fight with McLaren. However, they pretty much beat all the teams that we were expecting them to beat today. They come in 8th and 9th place, got the same points as McLaren. So for them, it's kind of a lesson learned and they just don't take any pain for it. So I don't think they'll be too disappointed with that. But one thing that has to be a concern for them in this championship is they're fighting McLaren right now, who, you know, for lack of a better way of putting it, Ricciardo is only recently getting closer to Norris's level at the moment. Today was an exception because he made a mistake and strategy kind of hindered his race. But McLaren are getting closer to having two drivers that can pick up points from on a regular basis, and that's what Ricciardo has been doing recently. Alpine, however, have been less cohesive with each other, and I think today was another prime example of Ocon and Alonso getting in each other's way. And, you know, I don't really want to pick sides in this, but I feel like more leeway has to be given from Ocon's side in these incidents, because we saw today the incident where Ricciardo passed the pair of them into turn 2 was caused ultimately because Ocon moved over into Alonso's line and compromised him as well as himself going into turn 2, which allowed Ricciardo through. And we saw this early in the season. We saw it in Jeddah when they were fighting each other, and Otmar Zafner was joking about maybe, you know, we might get on a podium today. I'm not sure if he was really serious about that, but if Alpine are going to finish best of the rest this season ahead of McLaren, both of their drivers need to be on par with each other. And I just don't see that right now. There's a battle for supremacy there when I feel like there doesn't really need to be one. Courtney, what are your thoughts on Alpine?
Yeah, I think in a way, I'm not surprised this has happened, because we're seeing with both Alonso and Ocon, their defensive driving has been probably more apparent compared to every other driver on the grid. So I guess there's a sense of inevitability that once they come together, they are going to be doing it to each other. But at the end of the day, Formula One is a team sport, and it doesn't look good. But I think we've seen throughout Fernando Alonso's career, as good as he is on track, I do feel that throughout his career, compared to a lot of drivers, he has struggled to be a team player. And I do think at times this season it has been the case. But I feel that both of them are capable of being a bit naughty. So as a driver pairing, it doesn't surprise me that at some point there is going to be fireworks.
And Lee, what are your thoughts on Alpine?
Yeah, I think, as you said, it's a battle of supremacy of. It's very much, I think, it's tit for tat of, oh, you did this to me last time, so I'm going to be doing this to you this time, and then it carries on and on. And that's not a great team environment. It's when you're not in a championship battle, you're trying to maximize your points against their midfield, and neither driver gives way to the other to let them pass on different strategies. And I really think that Otmar needs to talk to them both and go, look, we're in this tight battle with McLaren. They haven't made contact, but the way they're going, it's, you know, always like, don't make contact. You're on different strategies, let each other pass. You're going to slow it down, and it's not so much of, oh, he did this to me, oh, he did that to me, which is just the kind of feeling that I get from both of them. No, obviously that's just my gut feeling. But it's just a shame that they're potentially throwing away points just out of personal gain.
Well, this is it, and they got away with one today in that regard. But Bryson, I'll come to you quickly on Alpine, and obviously just to add to this, we've got a driver in Ocon who's obviously, you know, still a very young driver, but by no means a rookie in this regard. Very much the future of the Alpine team, and probably sees himself in that regard, picking up their win at this venue last season. Obviously a different race today. Fernando Alonso still driving incredibly well for his age. I mean, he seems to be a marvel of anything that we know about biology and Formula One in general, about sports people. He's just an incredible athlete and incredible what he does at his age. And both of them, even though it's not been confirmed with Alonso, we are expecting his medium-term future with the team for the next few years to be confirmed at some point, perhaps over the summer break. Ocon obviously has a few years on his contract as well. Does there really need to be a battle for supremacy between these two? Because I just feel like it's not necessary, and you're just going to cost each other points.
There doesn't need to be, but there's going to be.
Oh, I hope there's going to be.
Because we know how Fernando likes to race, and we know how Esteban likes to race. I mean, Sergio Perez could tell you that. I mean, it's not really a surprise. It's going to happen. Mm-hmm. Esteban will move on anybody in defense, and Fernando would do the same. They are costing themselves points, and in fact, I think, didn't Lewis get by the pair of them on the start?
He did, yeah, he did, but for the same reason as well, because Ocon went in front of Alonso. Yeah,
that shouldn't happen, and I believe as a part of that, Ocon, sort of moved to the right with Fernando between the pit wall and where Ocon was, and Fernando wasn't happy about that, and that was also part of the explanation for why their behavior was what it was later on in the race. I'm not sure. I'm not sure Otmar Safnauer can actually sit them down and fix this. I think they're going to have to figure it out themselves. They are two dynamic personalities with particular driving styles that may not be compatible, frankly. So yes, they're definitely losing points, and hopefully they'll let better reason prevail.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, today was one of those days where I think they can kind of learn these lessons, have a sit down and talk about it, knowing that they beat everybody today that they were expecting to beat. And of course, the bonus of beating Ricciardo obviously will help. And I mean, they weren't going to beat Norris today. He was faster than them, and he was ahead of him in the race anyway. So it's one of those where they can kind of take that for what it's worth, and there's no pain to it. So hopefully it won't affect them in other races. But that's kind of the issue for them, and they're in a very good car. So a lot of people would happily be driving an Alpine right now that aren't in one, and I'm pretty sure that's something that might be on not so much Alonso but Ocon's mind going forward. Being mindful of the time, I'm going to summarise some of the other races before we go to the final talking point, if I may. Obviously, AlphaTauri, another difficult race for them. Gasly P12, hardly saw Pierre Gasly today. I had to look through the standings just to be reminded that he was driving today, but P12 him. Tsunoda had a bit of a spin, obviously when there was a little bit of droplets down at the chicane, and that was a bit of concern for some people, but managed to keep it going, didn't cause a safety car, which might have created something interesting towards the end, we'll never know. Williams again, Albon, Latifi, down 17th and 18th. Wasn't really too much to say on their races, so to speak of. Bottas had some reliability troubles for Alfa Romeo, which ended his race early. He was the only retirement today. Zhou Guanyu, another solid drive, but Alfa Romeo worryingly seemed to be moving backwards rather than forwards in the development pecking order. We'll see if that continues after the summer break. Haas might be a bit disappointed in K-Mag's side because he was running the upgraded car this weekend, very much inspired by the Ferrari, the nice little dipped louvres as well. I'm sure Bryson, can I ask your thoughts on that? Were you intrigued to see, or were you surprised? Or you're not surprised?
It's very good. I think people, it's always just an inspiration. You're taking inspiration from another car, and it is very similar in design as far as the sort of Ferrari side pod tops and the engine cover, but it's not as aggressive actually. The bathtubs aren't actually as deep in the Haas as they are in the Ferrari, and it was slightly disconcerting that they were only like 4/10 different in qualifying, right? Or it was something less than that. You would like to kind of see more. But usually with upgrades, it takes one race to actually get them on the car, and then like maybe one or two other races to actually get the setup right. So it wouldn't surprise me if they're quite a bit faster in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's quite interesting as well, because we talk about teams and development this season, that one of the things that we have to stress is that teams can't reverse engineer what other teams are doing and try to adapt that onto their own car. They have to try and follow their own design concept, learn what they can. And if they're inspired by certain things, that's fine. But of course, it has to be of their own volition. It can't just be a carbon copy, although might be one or two teams in the paddock might be keeping an eye on that upgrade that Haas have got, especially considering their close connection with Ferrari, which we must stress has a big fence between the two sites to make sure, even though there are seconded personnel. So a bit of a combination of ideas may be at play despite that separation.
It does, and we have to give credit where it's due. Aston Martin was certainly talked about for copying certain aspects of Red Bull's side pod design, but they've been very innovative in terms of the bib vane at the front of the bottom of the floor that they had earlier in the season, and also their very interesting, rear wing end plate that they came up with this weekend. That was a very creative interpretation of the rules. So they're doing both. They're innovating and being inspired by, which is fine.
Yeah. And of course, one team that brought a very innovative, interesting piece was Aston Martin with the little edges of their rear wings. And obviously, that must have done a trick for them in this race. Whether they'll be able to keep them beyond the summer break remains to be seen if teams decide to protest it. But 10th and 11th for Vettel and Stroll. Again, Aston Martin, they don't have a great car for qualifying, but they seem to pick up points. They did the same thing in France, only this time it was the other way round. And I know it's not where Aston Martin would want to be, but again, they seem to have a pretty good race car.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that there's definitely potential there. They certainly will have some new blood sort of injected into the team next year for whoever takes over Seb's position. Not saying they'll be better necessarily, but it will kind of change the dynamic in the team, and that can always be potentially better. So,
yeah, absolutely right, guys. Sorry, I was just pressing the mute button on there a few too many times. Let's move on to the final part that I do want to talk about, if we can, for about 5-10 minutes or so. And that is the sad news that we received in the week that Sebastian Vettel, the 4-time Formula One world champion, is hanging up his racing gloves at the end of the season, and obviously took the time in typical Sebastian Vettel fashion. He sets up an Instagram account on social media, and of course Sebastian, anyone who knows Sebastian knows that he's not really a social media person. Intrigued he might be, but never really been involved in it. Sets up an Instagram page, and when I saw that, I kind of felt that this is going to be big, whatever he's going to use this for. And but typical Seb, a man of the people, fans first, rather than worrying about a press conference or anything like that, just to tell us all in the only way that Seb can, in a heartfelt message, just to tell us not only about what his future plans are and that he doesn't really know what he wants to do, but also the fact that he loves chocolate and the smell of fresh bread. And I'm sure many of us will agree with that one. But guys, I want to get your thoughts on this one. Were you surprised that this announcement came with Sebastian Vettel on his retirement? And what are your reactions to the news?
I'm not too surprised. I think it's been something that's sort of been... We've kind of been like willy won't he for quite a while now. But for me, if we look back through Seb's career, I really hope he gets remembered for, the ruthless driver that he was. And, particularly Red Bull, if that car was set up right, the guy was unstoppable. He'd whisk away in the distance. And sometimes when Red Bull were at their best, he'd sometimes win races by up to a minute. He was that good on his day. And I just hope that Sebastian gets remembered for, for his days at Red Bull and, the stuff that he's kind of done off track, the gestures that he made off track towards the tail end of his career, rather than what some of the younger fans will remember, like the spins and the misfortunes at his time, particularly towards the end of his time at Ferrari. The guy has achieved a lot on and off the track, and I just hope the guy gets remembered for the right reasons.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure he will. We're talking about a guy, you can look back on some of the all-time greats, and where Vettel stacks up amongst some of those is obviously debatable. For me, he's not at the absolute peak or the highest echelon of drivers. That's reserved for a very, very few names on that. The likes of the Sennas, the Hamiltons, the Schumachers, the Prost. Vettel's not quite at that level, but the next one below that, I certainly think he's very much in good company there. But of course, people will remember the good moments. They won't remember some of the silly ones in years to come, or like the mistakes that he made in 2018 or a crash here or there. They will remember the good times, the Red Bull years. 2015 Ferrari, probably, I think Vettel was at his peak, but then of course he went on quite a bit of a decline after that for years to come. Bryson, what are your thoughts on the Seb news, and what sort of fond memories would you have from Sebastian Vettel?
You guys don't know this because you don't know my entire personal history, but I'm old enough to actually have been at Sebastian's first race, if you recall. So in 2007, Robert Kubica had a serious crash in Canada, I think it was, and he was unable to race in the US the week after, and for BMW, and Seb filled in for him. And I was there for that race.
It's Indianapolis, wasn't it?
Yeah,
it was Indianapolis. Yes. Yeah. So I've actually seen Sebastian's career from beginning to end, and I've seen his transformation over the years. He's gone through different phases, the blonde phase and long hair phase, and all these sorts of things. And I'm sure he's changed as a person over that time. I'm sure having kids also changed his perception about a lot of things. But he is a passionate a person about his interests outside of the sport. He's also damn good in the sport, right? It's good that he has an opportunity to finish his career on his own terms. That's something that not everyone has an opportunity to do. And I wish him the best in his future endeavors, and we were sad to see him go.
Yeah, were you surprised by that decision he made? Because I know the plan originally, Aston Martin, they'd said that they were expecting to keep Seb on for at least another year, hoping perhaps, because he was still doing a relatively good job there. They were enjoying this sort of project that he was helping them embark on, although it has hit quite a few snags along the way. But this was ultimately one that was forced by Aston Martin, asking Vettel to make a decision before the summer break so that they had time to plan for either eventualities. And obviously it drove Seb to decide, you know what, I'd kind of had enough. Owing to what we saw early in the season, perhaps that took the surprise away a little bit, that this looked like a guy that wasn't really enjoying it, and perhaps it was better for him to call it quits when he could.
I was still surprised when he decided that, probably because I listened to the news, which is a mistake. But no, I was actually surprised. In fact, I think when he said that he was discussing that thought process, that he himself didn't actually make the decision until like the day before, right before he actually made the announcement. So I'm sure he was thinking about it for a very long time, but actually making the firm decision, it wasn't actually made until very, very recently before the message was going out. So I think it could have gone either way, but you really, it can't really go wrong. I think he's in a good position. And as I said, not everyone has an opportunity to leave the sport on their own terms. And so that's a positive thing.
No, absolutely. And I think that's the best that we can hope for Seb Vettel. Of course, whilst we wouldn't appreciate the sort of decline that he had, we certainly are grateful for the fact that he's able to walk away in the manner that in which he has done. And certainly very few drivers would have had the impact emotionally as well as from a sporting perspective that Sebastian Vettel has had. Lee, what are your final thoughts on Sebastian Vettel, retirement announcement, and obviously what sort of fond memories are you going to have from Seb that you're going to miss once he's hung up his gloves?
Well, it's definitely a shame to see it going. It is very much more the passing of the generation. We're now only got 2 drivers left from the 2008 season, being Fernando Alonso and Lewis Hamilton, and it's just a bit. The junior generation's coming. That's all I can really sum it up. But yeah, there's been some moments from Seb. I mean, I haven't been his greatest fan through his Red Bull domination because it was just a boring championship because he just disappeared. But I personally came to appreciate his driving when he went to Ferrari and seeing what he could do in the Ferrari at his peak. I'm not talking about his accidents and the declining, but where he was taking that fight to the Mercedes and taking that fight to Lewis. Maybe not over the championship season, but where he pulled out some brilliant performances in that Ferrari. And he obviously did performances in the Red Bull. But from my perspective, it was his Ferrari's time that convinced me this guy is actually the real deal. It's not just because he had the fastest car at Red Bull. And it is a shame to see it's such a good quality driver suffered down towards the bottom of the grid, and obviously decided time's enough, he wants to make a move. But the highlight for me will still always be his first win in that Toro Rosso Monza, or the only driver to name all world championships on the FIA or the FOM test, which is impressive alone.
Yeah, I mean, I'd definitely recommend that for anyone. I certainly couldn't do that. I could barely get all the Formula One world champions that they've been, let alone in chronological order going backwards. But obviously, it's a really good point you made, Lee, because I think the perception of Seb Vettel has certainly changed over the years. And Bryson, I'm quite intrigued by what the US perspective was in terms of how Seb was reported when he was coming through in his career, because we have so many different versions of Seb Vettel, and ultimately the person has not really changed too much. I think anyone that knows him personally would know that he's pretty much been the guy that wears his hearts on his sleeves. He's a very thoughtful person. He was always considerate to everyone and a wonderful person around him. But we weren't really privy to that side of Seb. It was very much isolated by being in the Red Bull camp and people's opinions of that. And obviously at Ferrari, which we all know is its own own media bubble. And obviously being the German driver, how it was reported in the UK, we saw very few snippets of Sebastian Vettel in that regard until after his Ferrari tenure, after that ended in the way that it did. We saw Seb the man. He was able to open up to the rest of us, and it just made everybody fall in love with the guy. And while we're all going to be very sad to miss him, how was it in the US? Was it similar for you? I imagine it probably was a little bit different to how the infamous British media decided to report on Seb Vettel.
Oh, Seb was great. I mean, he kind of showed up as this enigmatic, unique kid, just very young. This is sort of before Max Verstappen. He was kind of the youngest person to kind of enter on the scene. Just a young, simple person, liked driving race cars, and he was very, very quick. And I think everyone kind of understood that. And he raced hard, but he was fair, and he was very fast. I too remember his win in Monza, and it wasn't like a random thing. I mean, he got like pole too, if I remember correctly. It was a completely singular event that I think everyone remembers. Personally, I would actually like for a racetrack in Germany to name a corner or a complex of corners after him. He actually was born less than an hour away from the Hockenheim ring. I would actually think it would be cool to have a corner named after him in Hockenheim, but it's going to invite some awkward questions if it happens to be turn 12. No. So we can't call that corner Vettel, but maybe pick another one, the hairpin. We can call the hairpin Vettel hairpin, or pick something at the Nürburgring. I don't know, but I think that would be a cool gesture to see him off.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of corners at Nürburgring, but for the life of me, I can't think of a better one to pick at Hockenheim. But I'm sure Seb would probably take it all in good humour. If you asked him, he'd probably pick that one himself if he got to pick which corner. he would have. It's just a testament to the man, the Anglophile sense of humor, or the Anglophile sense of humor that he had. It's why we fell in love with him after a while. But guys, look, of course, thank you so much for tuning in. Bryson, thank you for staying on a little bit longer than we'd originally agreed. For the benefit of our listeners that haven't heard your great F1 insight or haven't seen you on the socials, where can they find you?
I am on Twitter at the handle Natural Paradigm, almost exclusively. Occasionally I'll be on Instagram, but it's kind of a waste of your time to go there because I don't post anything. Usually I'm covering the races and technical developments on Twitter, so that's where I am.
Yeah, and if you want some F1 insight, technical or on aero perspective, I guarantee, and if there's anyone that I am going to recommend you follow, Bryson is the guy. So get on that and follow him on the socials. You will not regret it. But make sure it's Twitter, because Instagram probably going to be not so active, but I digress. But if you enjoyed the episode, guys, remember, we're on YouTube, so you can like the episode and subscribe to the channel. We're chasing 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year. We're very much making good progress, but we need your help to help us get over the line. So really, really appreciate it if you could help us out. Of course, if you're listening to us on your favorite podcasting platforms, you can give us a review, preferably a 5-star one if you're feeling generous. But if you can, that would really help us out a lot. And of course, now we're at the summer break. Some of you guys are wondering what we're going to be doing. We're still going to be making some content for you, but of course that's going to come in the form of a few more whimsical episodes and a bit more of a mid-season review as and when we get there with some more great guests as well. So keep with us for the month of August. Before, of course, we returned for the Belgian Grand Prix, I believe, at the end of August. I believe that's correct. And of course, the shape and the dynamic of the F1 season could very much change owing to a few things that we are expected to come. We'll have to wait and see. But until next time, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Please do stay safe, and we will see you in the next episode of the DNF1 F1 podcast. And remember, as always, if you're not first, you're probably DNF1. Take care.
See you soon.
Goodbye.